Alright, you lot, how's it going? I want to go over some very basic stuff that'll help, well, it'll help mainly newer people to Nitro, really, more than anything else. Those of you that have been into Nitro for quite some time will already know a lot of this basic stuff that I'm going to go over. Most of it is to do with the radio gear, but there is a few other little things that I think will be worth going over, and it might help some people out. So I'm going to use this car as an example because it's one of the easiest ones that I can think of, because you can get to all the servos and everything quite easily. So some of the problems that I think some of you come across is being able to get your servos, like your throttle and your brakes, set up properly. So what some of you may come across is when you push on the brakes, it actually opens up your throttle and revs up the engine, and when you pull on the throttle it puts the brakes on, and you're thinking, what the bloody hell, I'm sure it's supposed to be the other way around. That's supposed to be throttle and that's supposed to be brakes. Well, you might think you've got some polarity around the wrong way or whatever, but you can't really, well, you could do, but it's unlikely if you've done that with a Nitro car because the way the servos and the receivers work. If this was an electric car, you could have the polarity around the wrong way. However, it's an easy fix. A lot of the time, most of the time, some of the time, when you get a new car or a new radio gear, a new transmitter with a receiver, they'll have the switch for the reverse throttle and brakes flicked in the wrong direction. You need to look for it. On this particular transmitter, you see where it says rev.sw. Rev stands for reverse. So all you need to do is get this switch, flick it in the opposite direction, and then you'll find throttle is throttle, brakes is brakes. Simple. And the same applies for steering. If you steer right, oh, it's not going to work because the steering is no good on this. If you steer right and it goes left, and you steer left and it goes right, all you have to do, get the steering reverse, flick it in the other direction, right will be right, left will be left. Simple. So the next thing, this transmitter is actually a pretty bad example, but it's the only one I've got about at the moment in order to show this. So the next thing is trim. Some of you probably will be having trouble getting the balance right between the throttle and the brakes because they're done on the same servo, and with some setups you have like a double stacked up thing where you got one horn coming off goes to the brakes, another horn above that which does the throttle, and they move at the same time but not at the same time in some weird way, like a Savage or a few other cars I can think of which have the same setup. But most cars, including this one, will have brakes here attached to the same horn as the throttle. So when you push the throttle moves, but the brakes obviously don't do anything because, well, the rod just does nothing there. Look. And then when you push brakes, the little spring compresses there on the throttle, so the throttle's not going to be overstressed, but it pulls on the brakes. So you've got an adjustment here for brakes, so you can undo the grub screw and move that little brass collar up and down on that little piece of rubber tubing. You can increase or decrease the length of the rubber pipe, bushing or whatever you want to call it. You've got adjustment for the throttle here. This one will adjust what happens when you push the brakes, and this one here will adjust how far it pushes the throttle open. Now opening the throttle, you can see the throttle is leaning against that other brass one there. So if you was to have this one moved too far in this direction when you do full throttle, it won't be pushing full throttle because that won't be pushing the throttle all the way open. Also, if you have this too far this way, it'll always be, you'll have a high tick over and you won't be able to get it tuned properly for tick over. That is the more coarse adjustment. The fine adjustment is on the transmitter, but in my opinion, what you need to do before you start messing around with any trims on any transmitters, you need to make sure that your throttle and all of these linkages are in a roughly neutral position. In order to get the servo in a neutral position, you have to take the little screw out and take the horn off. Then you go to your transmitter and set it to roughly central. On these transmitters it's difficult to show you because they're a stupid switch that you push up and down. Some transmitters have a physical dial where you can set it in the middle. For example, these HPI transmitters are one of my favourite transmitters that come with the HPI cars back 20 years ago. Very good transmitter. These are the throttle and steering trims here. Now you can see throttle trim. This even has a little line there to show you where it is. Now, as you can see, that will go all the way down to there, and it'll also go all the way down to there. So this means that when that little line here, as you can see, is facing dead upwards, that is central. So what you would have to do, you take the horn off, as I explained, by removing that one screw there, and then the horn will just pop off, and then you'll have just a bare servo. Turn that to the neutral position. It'll look different on some transmitters. If you've got a digital transmitter, one of these stupid ones here, you'll have to find it and put it to 50%. With these ones, they're just a pain to try and set to neutral. Need a bit more experience. I dare say some people will know how to set them to central. There's probably a setting or something, but you just need to get it. What I would do with one like this, if you've got the switches, I would have a look at the servo with the horn off. I would set it all the way one way, and then I would mark it, and then I would set it all the way in the other direction, and then I would see how far it turns, and I would mark it again, and then I would keep setting it until the mark on the servo is in between the two marks left and right which I had made. That's the way I would do that. I hope that made sense to you. It made sense to me, but if it didn't, I'll have to make it a bit clearer one day. Once you've got that servo centered, you need to put the horn. This is where you're just going to have to use your own common sense, in my opinion. You've got to put the horn in somewhat of a fashion where the throttle is at tick over when you're not doing any adjustment. Yeah, the servo centered, that is neutral position, tick over position. You put the horn on in such a fashion where the brakes aren't on, and also the throttle is at tick over position. If you can't get that, you need to adjust one of these, yeah, until you get it right. But you don't want to put the horn on with the throttle open or with the brakes on or something like that, because then you'll just be back to square one. Alright, so make sure when you put the horn back on with it in the central position, you put it on with it on tick over there and the brakes off. Then you're at base neutral settings basically, and then you can do fine tuning with the transmitter, just adjusting the trim which way you need to get it spot on. Next thing is the same principle but with the steering. It seems I've already explained how to get the steering to go in the right directions, but some of you are also having trouble where you're adjusting the trim, your steering trim there, but you're not being able to get it right. You're running out of trim, there's no more movement on the trim, but you're still going in one direction or another. You're not going straight. All you need to do, I can't show you on this one because I've picked a car where the steering servo is all the way in there and I'm going to have to take it apart in order to get to it. But you just need to take off the horn. It's in the same fashion as the throttle. Take the steering horn, take the screw out, take the horn off, do exactly the same thing as what you've done with the throttle. Center it to 0. Alright? Steering trim is here. Center that little line, what you see here, center that to 0. That's all the way to the right. That's all the way to the left. Facing down, where the two arrows are, is 0. I know some controllers, transmitters will be different, but it's the same principle. If you've got a digital one, 50%. If you've got one of these stupid ones, do the same as what I explained. And that way, you'll know that it's definitely centered. One thing that you can do is you could invest in one of these servo testers. They have a center function. There's different types. This one is one of them. You've got manual, neutral, and auto. Auto automatically goes left to right, tests the servo. Neutral brings it into the center position. It automatically centrals the servo for you, so you don't have to mess around. You just plug it in, press neutral, and it's centered. And manual, you can manually turn the dial and put the servo in any position you want to put it in. But you don't need one of these. You can do it perfectly fine with your transmitter. Another small thing which people seem to be overlooking or not realizing perhaps that it would be better to have it set up in a certain way is the Filesafe. I'm not going to tell you how to actually activate the Filesafe in this video, because some receivers are different. You have to do different methods and things like that for 2.4 gigahertz. But you'll have to look up how to set the Filesafe. But you can set Filesafes in 3 different positions. Well, you can set them in many different positions. You could set them for half throttle if you wanted to. But the general position, some of them come and they're on full throttle because they're just set up by idiots in the factories. So you need to make sure, and some people set them so they just go to tick over, which is all very well and good because your car won't be running away, but you really ideally want to set them up so that they go to full brakes, because the first thing you want to do is stop when you lose transmissions, or if your battery goes too low. The first thing you want to do is the car just come to a dead stop, and then that way you can go and work out what the problem is. You might have been going really quick, you lose signal, and the engine goes to tick over, but the car's still flying along, rolling along somewhere, and you've got no signal, you've got no steering input because you've got no signal, and it's going to go into a ditch or somewhere. You want it to just come to a dead stop, and that's that. And you can simulate to see what your one is actually doing by simulating losing signal. And the way you simulate losing signal is you simply turn it on like I've done here and turn the transmitter off, and you should see what your Filesafe is set up to do. As you can see, my one is set to go to brakes, and that's, in my opinion, what you want it to do. As I said, many receivers have different methods. I know a lot of them are very similar, so I could go through the methods of setting the Filesafe. Normally you push in the little button on the top of it, turn the transmitter on and hold the brakes, and then turn it all off and it sets it. But some receivers are different to others, so you'll have to look up in your instruction manual how to set the Filesafe. But I would definitely recommend that you set it so it goes to brakes. One of the other things that I get asked a lot about Filesafes is, Filesafes are all very well and good, but surely the servo needs power, it needs electric to it in order to put the brakes on. Well, that's 100% true. So if you have some sort of malfunction where either your battery becomes disconnected in the receiver, you may be using, this is where it's one of those situations where it's do as I say and not do as I do, because as you'll see, I'm using the battery types which I'm going to say are not good to use unless you take precautions. Just like life and with women. Some things are safe, but they are safer with precautions. This is an RC condom. Anyway, what you need to do is make sure that your connection between the receiver and the battery pack is secure, because if this becomes disconnected, right, your receiver's not going to have any power. So in the event that you're blasting down a field or down a track or a piece of tarmac or a road and there's a bump, and this was on the edge of being connected, and oh, well, there we go, perfect example. This was on the edge of being connected and the wire comes out. Well, now we have no power to the receiver, the failsafe is not going to be activated because the receiver's got no electric. So it can't activate anything. The servo probably, good example here, is going to be stuck on full throttle. Because there's no electric, the servo doesn't automatically return with no electric. Some servos do. If you've got a throttle spring, it might overpower the servo and bring it back to tick over. This doesn't have a throttle spring on it, so if this becomes disconnected, if it's on throttle, it's going to stay on throttle. There's nothing you can do. It's one of those things. That's just life. You're going to have a running away car, and you're going to have to go and find it in the middle of a field somewhere. The other thing is, if you're using these battery packs, put a cable tie around the batteries, because these have a tendency to pop out, in which case you have the same scenario. You're losing electric power to the receiver, in which case any failsafe is not going to work. You're not going to have any steering, you're not going to have any brakes, you're not going to have nothing. The car's just going to do whatever it wants to do and off it goes. Failsafes only work if there is still electric power, if there's still potential, if there's still volts, if there's still power, electricity going to the receiver. That is when failsafes work. If there's no electric, they don't work. Another time when a failsafe isn't going to do any favours for you, it's not going to work, is if one of your linkages becomes disconnected. For example, if this rod here for the throttle was to come off for some reason, let's say the horn snapped or the screw came out there and the horn popped off, the servo is going to be doing its thing, but it's not connected to the throttle or the brakes. So you're not going to have brakes, you're not going to have throttle. And if you lose signal or your battery runs flat, whatever, the receiver's going to make the servo go into brakes, but the brakes aren't going to come on because the brakes aren't connected to the servo. And the throttle is not connected either, so it could be on full throttle. And it's going to, the failsafe's not going to do a single thing. So there are, even though you've got a failsafe, you're not 100% protected against having a runaway car. But that's just the way life is. On your real full-sized car, you might have a fly-by-wire fibre optic cable or a physical throttle cable. One of those could still get, the throttle cable could get stuck or jammed. You know, if you've got an automatic, you're in trouble. You have to fanny around. Nothing is, you know, foolproof. Hopefully those little things have helped you out, because sometimes it's the little things what, you know, just cause headaches. If you don't know what to look for or what to do, it's always the small things. You might be doing drastic things, you know, thinking that something's drastically wrong, when really it's just a small little thing which, you know, if you know what you're doing, it takes a couple of minutes to rectify. So I hope that that's helped some of you lot out, and I'll catch you on the next one. If you have any questions, put them in the comments section to this video, and if I think I can help you out, I'll make a video on how to repair whatever it is you need to do, or other people will see your comment and they'll comment on your comment, and we can all have a conversation and people can help each other, and it always works out really well. So I'll catch you on the next one. Thanks for watching, and as I said, hope it helped you. If you like this kind of thing, you know, stick around, and there'll be many more videos to help everybody out coming along soon. All the best, you lot, and take care.